In this video, I'm going to describe how to add submenus to native Windows and also how to use keyboard shortcuts. For this demonstration, I'll use an application named submenusandshortcuts.mxml that's in the Chapter 07 Begin project. If you're following along with the exercises, open the application in Flex Builder. In this version of the application, I'm once again creating a menu and then adding it either to the native window or the native application, depending on the operating system. In the Create Menu method, I'm now adding submenus. A submenu is a menu that appears when the user clicks on a top-level menu item. For instance, if the user clicks on the File menu item, I'd like to display a submenu that includes items such as Open, Close, and other file-related actions. Currently, I'm getting the submenu from a method named createFileMenu, which is declared a little further down in the code. To see this behavior, I'll place the cursor after the line of code that creates the menu inside the createFileMenu method. Then I'll add a couple of new items to the menu. I'll call menu.addItem, and then I'll pass in a new native menu item, and I'll add in a string of open as the menu item's label. I'll add another item, once again adding the native menu item using its constructor method, and this time the label will be close. I need to make sure that I've added the right number of parentheses at the end of each line of code. That code should now work. Now, as you add more items to the menu, it becomes a little bit cumbersome to call the addEventListener method for each menu item. In fact, you can actually listen for an event at the top level menu rather than on each individual menu item. So that's what I'll do. I'll go back to the Create Menu method, and I'm going to take the addEventListener code that's currently listening on a single item. I'm going to cut it to the clipboard, and then move it below the first line of code that creates the menu. I'll paste it in, and then I'll change the member on which the addEventListener method is called from menu item 1 to simply menu. Then I'll go locate the addEventListener call for menu item 2, and I'll remove that. I now have a single event listener for the entire menu, and it will work whether the user chooses a top-level menu item without a submenu or individual submenu items. I'll save the change and run the application in debug mode. Now watch what happens. When I click a top-level item that has a submenu and select one of its items, I get feedback in the form of a trace output in the console. I'll do that again for File, Close, and you should see the same reaction. Now when I click Edit at this point, I'm not getting any feedback. And that's because the Edit menu item also has a submenu, which has been created in the Create Menu method, and it's shown here, currently on line 37 of my code, where I'm setting that top-level object's submenu using the Create Edit menu method. So let's go to that method. This time, as I create and add items to the menu, I'm going to return a reference to that item so that I can modify its behavior a little bit. Within the Create Edit menu, I'm first going to create a new variable named copy command, data typed as a native menu item. Then I'm going to call menu.addItem, and as before, I'll instantiate the object using the native menu item class's constructor method. Now that should be enough, but I'd also like to add a keyboard shortcut. To add a keyboard shortcut to a menu item, set its key equivalent property like this. Copy cmd dot key equivalent equals, and then the letter that I want to attach. The automatic behavior will be that on Windows, the user will be able to hold down a Control key and press C, and on Mac, they'll be able to hold down the Command key and press C. And that will have the same functional effect as selecting the menu from the item with the mouse. Now I'll do the same thing, and I'll create a paste command. Once again, data typing it as an instance of native menu item. I'll add the item to the menu, and I'll construct the native menu item and pass in a label of paste. I'll make sure I've added my closing parentheses in both lines of code. And then for the paste command, I'll once again add a keyboard shortcut using the key equivalent property. And for this menu item, I'll choose the letter P. I'll save the changes and run the application, once again in debug mode. When the application opens up, I'll open the Edit menu and select Copy, and I should see the menu item is selected, and then I'll select Paste, and I should once again see that the menu item is selected. Now I'll press the appropriate keyboard shortcuts. Here's Control P, and here's Control C. And you'll see the trace output appear in the console and Flex Builder in the background. This should be working in the same way on Mac OS X. Instead of pressing Control C or Control P, you'll press Command C or Command P. So that's a look at adding submenus and using keyboard shortcuts on native menu items.